Chapter 454. Tonight, under the dim, cold wash of the dark moon, the hidden layers of the kingdom were being stripped apart. Dozens of factions that had long operated in the shadows, corrupt houses, covert networks, and quiet power brokers, were shaken to their core. Before most of them could even understand what was happening, figures dressed in black were already among them. The work was precise and absolute. No warnings, no negotiations. By the time it ended, only blood remained thick, spreading across stone floors, pooling beneath bodies that would never be found by those who once relied on them. Entire groups erased in silence, as if they had never existed at all. At the peak of a tall castle tower, Viper stood alone, looking down over the sleeping capital. The wind tugged faintly at the edges of his cloak, but he did not move. In his hand was a list of 17 names written in clean, deliberate strokes. 14 had already been crossed out. He lifted the pen and marked the 15th. Only 3 factions left, he noted calmly. After that, just the smaller gangs and bandits. Those were already being handled. Blitz and Dagger had been dispatched earlier, tasked with clearing out the outskirts, systematically removing the lesser groups that thrived beyond the capital's reach. Inside the city, the operation was tighter. 5 teams moved in coordination. 3 of them worked in the dark, tracking down factions even the kingdom itself had failed to identify, dismantling them while extracting whatever information they could. Viper and Fang, as the leading pair, focused only on the names provided, the ones that mattered most. The list had come directly from the head of the Thul family, obviously under Razeal's orders. In any other time, most of these groups would have remained untouched, not because they were unknown, but because they were inconvenient to remove. Politics, balance, fear of retaliation. Each faction operated carefully, never crossing the line far enough to force the kingdom's hand, always staying just within the boundaries of tolerance. Removing them would have caused more disruption than leaving them in place. That logic no longer applied. Razeal had no reason to preserve a system built on compromise. Half the world was already positioned against him anyway. Offending a few more factions meant nothing. So the order was simple. Erase them. No hesitation. No negotiation. The capital was being cleaned, one shadow at a time. This kingdom is filled with so much filth, Fang said from beside him, his voice low, but edged with irritation. I do not understand how it was allowed to rot like this without anyone acting. Viper did not look at him. His gaze remained on the city below. That is the work we were given, he replied evenly. So we finish it. A faint pause followed. Let the ground drink what needs to be spilled. His eyes cooled behind the mask. Then he vanished. Their next target was a hidden society buried beneath the city, an underground market dealing in everything the surface refused to acknowledge. Slaves, forbidden goods, illicit trades. Nobles and high-ranking officials moved through it as customers, protected by anonymity and influence. The entrance was deliberately unimpressive. A small, forgettable shop tucked between larger establishments, its worn exterior drawing no attention. Beneath it, however, lay a spacious underground hall, secured, concealed, and well-guarded. 10 armed guards stood at the stairway leading down. They never saw the attack clearly. 2 figures stepped out of the dark. By the time the guards reacted, their heads were already falling. Steel never rang. No spells were cast. The motion was clean and efficient, each strike placed with absolute precision. Heads rolled across the stone steps, leaving streaks of blood in their wake. A moment later, the bodies followed, collapsing with dull, heavy thuds. Silence returned just as quickly. Fang stepped forward without hesitation and drove his foot into the reinforced metal gate at the base of the stairway. Layers of protective magic flickered across its surface, reacting too late. The impact tore through it. The metal bent inward with a violent crunch before ripping free entirely, thrown off its hinges, and sent crashing deep into the chamber beyond. Against even a normal saint, such defenses were meaningless. Magic below that threshold was nothing more than delay. The sound echoed through the underground hall, drawing attention immediately. Conversations halted. Movement stilled. Dozens of eyes turned toward the entrance. Viper walked in first. His dark, fitted attire absorbed the light rather than reflecting it, his presence quiet yet oppressive. The moment Viper stepped fully into the underground hall, the entire space seemed to contract around him. It was not the kind of fear that came from noise or chaos. It was quieter than that, more instinctive. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Hands that had been moving over coin, over contracts, over flesh, froze where they were. Even those who did not understand what had happened at the entrance felt it immediately. Something was wrong. The hall was wide and layered, built with care to resemble a marketplace rather than a den of crime. Stalls lined both sides, displaying goods that would never see the surface openly, enchanted artifacts without records, poisons sealed in glass, documents, rare creatures kept in cages, and, further inside, people. Slaves stood restrained behind iron bars, some silent, some too tired to react, others staring blankly, as if they had long since accepted where they were. Every face in the hall was hidden. Dark masks of different shapes and materials concealed identities. Some were simple cloth coverings, others crafted in metal, or carved designs, reflecting status rather than necessity. Many stood with guards, armed escorts positioned just behind or beside them, watching everything with trained caution. And yet, none of it mattered, because whatever entered the hall had already broken the balance they relied on. Fang stepped in a moment after Viper, rolling his shoulder once as if shaking off stiffness, his gaze sweeping lazily across the room. His expression carried no urgency, no tension, only mild interest, as if he had walked into something beneath his concern. Messy place, he commented, almost amused. Viper did not respond. He walked forward at the same steady pace, his presence drawing attention without effort. There was no need to raise his aura, no need to announce himself. The silence spreading through the hall did that for him. A few guards were the first to move. They stepped forward cautiously, weapons raised, trying to reassert control before panic could take hold. One of them spoke, voice sharp, attempting authority. "You are in the wrong place." He did not finish. Viper moved once. There was no visible wind-up, no exaggerated motion. One moment he was standing still, the next he had passed through them. The guards froze for half a breath, before their bodies gave out, collapsing where they stood, clean cuts marking the end of their movement. Blood spread quietly beneath them, dark against the stone. The hall went silent. People stepped back instead of forward. Guards repositioned instinctively, pulling closer to those they were assigned to protect. Some of the masked figures began retreating deeper into the hall, trying to create distance without drawing attention. Then the shouting began. "You cannot just do this. Do you know where you are?" One voice broke out, sharp with forced confidence. "This is protected territory." Another followed, louder, less controlled. "Stop them. What are you waiting for?" A younger voice cut through, strained and angry. "Do something. Do you know who I am?" Several figures pushed forward from the middle rows, their movements less controlled, more reactive. Unlike the others, they carried themselves with entitlement rather than caution. Their masks were more decorative, their clothing more refined. Behind them, guards moved quickly to close the distance. "Are you deaf?" One of them snapped, pointing toward Viper. "I said do something." Viper did not slow. He walked past them, not ignoring them out of arrogance, but because they were irrelevant. The first of them lunged anyway, either out of panic or pride. His guard followed immediately, blade drawn, aura flaring. Fang moved this time. He stepped forward once and caught the incoming blade mid-motion, fingers closing around the steel as if it were no more than a stick. The guard's expression changed too late. Fang twisted his wrist slightly, and the weapon snapped cleanly. The same motion carried through, his arm following into the guard's chest with controlled force. The body folded inward before hitting the ground. Fang glanced at the broken blade in his hand, then let it fall. "Too loud," he said, almost bored. The young noble froze where he stood, whatever anger he had carried dissolving into something else entirely. He tried to speak again, but the words did not come out the same. "You cannot." "I am." Fang did not even look at him when he moved again. The strike was quick, efficient. The body dropped without ceremony. The rest of them did not try again. The realization spread through the hall in layers. These were not intruders to be negotiated with, not enemies to be stalled or threatened. They were here to just kill everyone. From the deeper end of the chamber, movement shifted. The crowd parted slightly as a figure stepped forward, escorted by multiple guards. His presence carried authority, not the loud, insecure kind, but the practiced confidence of someone used to being obeyed. His mask was more refined than the others, polished, deliberate. Even without seeing his face, the way he stood made his position clear. Enough. The word carried across the hall, forcing attention back toward him. He looked at Viper directly. "You have made your point," he said, voice controlled. "But you have made a mistake." A pause. "I am the younger brother of Marvin Crail, a renowned merchant of the Imperial capital." The name was not spoken loudly, but it did not need to be. It carried weight on its own. "This place exists because it is allowed to exist," he continued. "Because removing it would cost more than tolerating it. You understand what that means. If even a hair on my head were touched, this whole empire would disappear." His tone sharpened slightly. "So walk away now, and this ends here. Continue, and you won't just be making enemies of us." Viper stopped. For the first time since entering, he shifted his attention fully. Not impressed or threatened, just acknowledging. For a brief second, the hall held its breath. Then Viper tilted his head slightly, as if considering something trivial. "Finished?" he asked. The man stiffened. Fang let out a quiet breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "That is it," he said. "I expected more." At the shift in their attitude, the masked man's expression hardened beneath the cover of his mask. "Who sent you?" he demanded, voice controlled, but edged now with tension. He still had not fully understood what stood in front of him. The guards around him had not been weak. Every one of them was at least B rank, trained, equipped, and chosen carefully. The two closest to him, his personal protectors, were a rank, assigned directly by his brother to ensure nothing in this place ever got out of control. And yet some B rank protectors had fallen. Not in a prolonged exchange. Not even in a proper fight. They had simply fallen. His frown deepened as the realization began to form. Whoever these two were, they were beyond a rank. That narrowed things, but it did not give him an answer. He tried to think quickly, who would dare send someone like this into a place backed by Imperial influence? Viper did not respond. He did not even acknowledge the question. "Fang," Viper said calmly, without turning, his gaze already set forward. "Kill everyone inside this building. Leave the slaves. And leave this one." His eyes rested briefly on the masked head. "I will deal with him personally." Fang, who had been standing loosely to the side, paused mid-glance, his attention shifting back to Viper. For a moment, he did not move. "Everyone," Fang repeated, tilting his head slightly. His tone was not resistant, just curious. "Some of them are just buyers, visitors. There are nobles' children here too." His eyes moved across the hall, taking in the scattered figures, the shifting panic. "You are sure, leader," he added. "Cleaning them out completely will cause problems later. Some of them might not even be directly involved." Viper continued walking. No one who comes here is innocent, he said, voice steady, without emphasis. And problems are not our concern. A brief pause. Our orders are simple. Clean the capital. He did not look back. This is part of it. Do as I said. That was the end of it. Fang exhaled lightly through his nose, something faintly amused flickering beneath his mask. As you say, leader. His stance shifted. Then he was gone. The head of the society felt it before he saw the change in the air, the sudden absence of Fang from where he had been standing. His instincts tightened sharply. Stop him, he shouted, his voice breaking through the hall. Stop them both. If they ran, they would die one by one. If they stayed, they might still die. But together there was at least a chance. The guards nearest him hesitated for only a fraction of a second. Then they moved. Both the rank protectors stepped forward at once, their auras flaring fully, no longer holding back. Steel came out in clean arcs, blades cutting directly toward Viper as he approached, their timing precise, their intent clear. Viper did not even slow. He did not raise his hand. He did not shift his posture. He walked forward as if they were not there. For a split second, it almost looked like the strikes would land. Then, before the blades could reach him, something else moved. A thin distortion cut through the space between them. The guards did not even realize what had happened. Their momentum carried forward, but their bodies no longer followed as one. Armor split cleanly along unseen lines, metal parting without resistance. Flesh followed a heartbeat later. Both of them came apart mid-step. The pieces fell to the ground in heavy, uneven thuds. Viper walked through them without breaking pace. Behind him, Fang moved. He did not rush in a straight line. He wove through the crowd, his path cutting through clusters of people, his movement controlled, almost casual. His blade flashed only in short, efficient motions, nothing wasted, nothing exaggerated. Where he passed, thin red lines appeared. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the blood followed. Bodies dropped in sequence, as if delayed by a single breath. Some collapsed without sound. Others managed half-formed cries before they were cut short. The guards who tried to intercept him lasted slightly longer, their movements sharper, their reactions faster, but it did not change the outcome. They fell the same way. Fools, Fang muttered under his breath, almost to himself, his tone carrying mild disappointment more than anger. The hall broke completely now. Panic spread in full. People tried to run, pushing past each other, knocking over stalls, slipping on blood already spreading across the floor. Some turned toward hidden exits, others toward guards who were no longer standing. A few tried to fight anyway, driven more by fear than logic. None of it mattered. Fang moved through them without urgency, but without pause. Every step ended someone. The sound of bodies hitting stone, of metal dropping from lifeless hands, of short, cut-off screams, it all blurred into a single, continuous background. And through all of it, Viper continued forward. Who are you? Leave me. I will pay you. I will pay anything. 10 times what anyone paid you. Just leave me alive. Please. I beg you. The man's voice broke apart as he spoke. He had already dropped to the ground without realizing it, hands scrambling against the blood-slick floor as he tried to pull himself back. Around him, the remains of his guards lay scattered in pieces, armor split open as easily as cloth, the smell of iron thick in the air. Viper kept walking toward him. No change in pace. No visible reaction. How much wealth do you have? Viper asked, his tone flat, almost idle. The question did not fit the situation. That made it worse. I have more than enough, the man stammered, nodding quickly, almost violently. His hands moved to his fingers, pulling off ring after ring, space rings, each one carrying years of accumulated wealth, contracts, hidden reserves. Here, take these. Take everything. I can give more. I will give more. Just let me live. He threw them forward in desperation. The rings slid across the floor, leaving thin streaks through the blood as they came to a stop near Viper's feet. Viper bent slightly and picked them up in one smooth motion. No hurry, no greed. He weighed them briefly in his palm, then slipped them away in his pocket. All right then, he said. Give me your wealth. I will see if it is enough. The man froze. For a moment, his mind did not catch up. I just gave you everything, he said, voice shaking, confusion mixing with panic. Those rings, everything is in them. I will give you more if you want, just do not. Gave what? Viper interrupted. His tone did not change. I did not receive anything. The man blinked, stunned. What do you mean, he stammered. I just gave you the rings. I threw them right. Rings, Viper repeated, as if the word itself did not register. What rings? I did not receive any rings. For a brief second, the man's mind went blank. Then his eyes dropped to his own hands. Empty. He had given them to this man. The realization hit slowly. Not confusion. Not misunderstanding. Mockery. His breathing turned sharp. You. His voice tightened, anger forcing its way through the fear. You dare. His face twisted, red with something between panic and rage. But Viper did not seem to care. You dare lie to me. The words barely left his mouth as Viper stepped forward once more. Die, you lying soul, he said quietly. There was no movement visible, no drawn weapon. The man's body jerked, then split. Clean, controlled lines cut across him in an instant, dividing him into sections before gravity took hold. The pieces fell apart where he sat, collapsing onto the blood-covered floor in silence. It ended as quickly as it began. Viper stood there for a moment, looking down at what remained. Then he turned. The hall behind him had gone still, completely still. What had once been a crowded underground market was now nothing more than a slaughtered space, blood covering the stone, bodies scattered without order, stalls overturned and abandoned. The air had changed. Heavy. Quiet. Fang was already done. He stood at the far end, blade lowered, posture relaxed again, as if nothing of effort had been required. Viper reached into his pocket and pulled out the list. He looked at it briefly, then crossed out another name. I hate killing and robbing people, he murmured, his tone carrying no weight behind the words, almost conversational. But circumstances do not leave much room. If not, I am not a bad person from heart. He folded the paper and slipped it back into his pocket. Let us move. And without another glance at what was left behind, they left the hall the same way they had entered it, quietly, as if nothing had happened. Chapter 455. Razeal slowly opened his eyes and drew in a long breath. The cold night air filled his lungs as his gaze steadied once more, the faint haze of concentration leaving his mind. For a few moments he remained seated against the stone wall, silent beneath the pale moonlight that washed over Silver Shield City. Then he rose to his feet in one smooth motion. Maria walked toward him, folding her arms beneath her chest. There was irritation in her voice, though clear relief hid beneath it. Are you finally awake, she said. I mean, are you up now? Razeal ignored the remark. His eyes moved past her toward the battlefield beyond the walls. The land remained scarred from the attack by Sophia. Vast craters filled with dark water stretched across the plains, and shattered earth glistened silver beneath the moon. No golems remained in sight. No soldiers either. Only silence. Too much silence. How is the situation? He asked quietly. Are there any further attacks? No, Lady Vera answered, approaching from the side. Her silver cloak swayed lightly behind her in the wind. Exhaustion lingered beneath her calm expression, though she kept herself composed. Everything has remained still since the last assault. There is no movement from the enemy lines. No reinforcements. Nothing. She paused briefly, glancing toward the distant darkness beyond the ruined battlefield. It is strange, she admitted. Almost eerie. It feels less like they retreated and more like they simply stopped. Razeal kept his gaze fixed ahead. Do not lower your guard, he said after a moment. Not for a second. This war is far from over. The words settled heavily over those gathered atop the wall. Lord Kale frowned deeply. Lord Tor Karvek stood with his newly restored arm folded across his chest, jaw tense. Even Vera's eyes darkened slightly at the reminder. They all understood it already. Whatever happened today had not ended anything. It had only drawn greater attention toward the kingdom. Grace stood near the battlements with both hands clasped tightly before her. Is there any way to stop this war? She asked softly. A faint helplessness colored her voice, something that did not suit someone of her status. Razeal did not answer immediately. Instead, he slowly lifted his head toward the sky. High above the city walls, almost impossible to notice against the dark clouds, a lone bird circled through the night air. It was small and ordinary looking, yet its eyes were fixed directly upon them. They were fixed directly upon him. Razeal narrowed his eyes slightly as the creature stared back without fear. A scout. Maybe magical. Maybe controlled. Probably. After several quiet seconds, he finally spoke. I think all of you already know why the Pillar family attacked this kingdom, he said calmly, his gaze still lingering on the bird overhead. So there is no point pretending otherwise. Nobody spoke. The wind moved quietly across the walls. We all know what this is about, Razeal continued. The head of the Rock Pillar family is not doing this for territory, or wealth, or politics. His voice hardened slightly. This is revenge. At those words, the atmosphere seemed to grow even heavier. And until every person in this kingdom experiences fear, suffering, and despair, he said, finally lowering his gaze toward them, he will not stop. Silence followed. A hard silence. Grace's face paled visibly. Her shoulders stiffened as though the words themselves had struck her. Nearby, Lord Kale looked away grimly, while Karvek's expression turned colder by the second. Even Vera's calm composure faltered for an instant. They knew. None of them could deny it. Maria stepped forward at once, confusion and disbelief written plainly across her face. What are you even talking about? She asked sharply. Why would a Pillar family wage war against some small kingdom? And not just war, but this. Her voice rose slightly as she gestured toward the ruined plains beyond the city. Mass slaughter. Terrorizing civilians. What kind of revenge is that? Razeal glanced toward Grace. Maybe you should ask her, he said simply. Her mother was the sister of the head of the Rock Pillar family. She probably knows more than anyone here. Grace visibly trembled. Her head lowered immediately, strands of pale hair falling across her face as shame spread through her expression. The reaction alone answered half the question. Maria stared at her in shock. What? She said. Clearly, she had known nothing about this. Her eyes narrowed as she looked between them all. How was something like this hidden? No one answered her. There was no good answer. Lady Vera, however, did not linger on the matter. Whatever truths lay buried beneath this conflict could wait. The kingdom itself might not survive long enough for blame to matter. She stepped closer to Razeal, her face serious now. How much time do we have? She asked directly. At that question, Razeal slipped one hand into his pocket and did not answer immediately. Instead, his eyes drifted upward once more toward the lone bird circling high above the battlefield. The creature was still there, gliding through the dark sky beneath the moonlight, as though patiently observing everything below. His gaze narrowed faintly. The mysterious danger surrounding the Empire has disappeared, he said at last. Which means the Empress has most likely learned about the little move the Pillar family made. He paused briefly. A Pillar family starting a war under her rule, without her approval. That alone is enough to shake the entire Imperial court. Right now, the Rock Pillar family is probably more occupied dealing with that matter than this battlefield. Lady Vera hesitated. For the first time since the war began, something close to hope flickered across her face. Her Imperial Majesty was not aware of this, she asked carefully. Then does that not mean the war is effectively over? Her voice grew steadier as she spoke. I assumed this attack must have had Imperial sanction from the beginning. But if it does not, she looked toward the ruined battlefield again, then the Empress can stop it. Pillar family or not, they cannot openly defy an Imperial decree. She would never allow something this monstrous to continue. The words spread through those gathered atop the wall like the first warmth after a long winter night. Grace visibly straightened. Even Lord Torha's grim face loosened slightly. The Queen herself looked as though she wanted desperately to believe it. But then Razeal chuckled. A quiet, cold sound. You give her far too much credit, he said. She is nothing more than a hypocrite. The faint hope that had appeared vanished almost immediately. Lord Kale frowned deeply and stepped forward. And how can you be so certain of that, he asked. Razeal finally looked away from the sky and toward him. Because I am not an idiot, unlike every one of you. There was no emotion in his voice now. Prepare yourselves. That is all I am saying. His gaze moved across each of them slowly. This is not some story where you sit around hoping another person will save you. If you wait for someone else to stop this war for you, then you deserve whatever follows. The sharpness in his tone made several of them stiffen. I have already told you what I know, he continued. Ignore it if you want. But when the consequences arrive, do not pretend nobody warned you. The wind blew heavily across the walls. Then Razeal spoke the next words calmly. In a day or two, a Supreme will step onto these battlefields. Everything froze. For a moment, nobody even reacted. A Supreme, Lady Vera's voice came out almost sharply. That is impossible. Actual fear entered her expression for the first time. No Supreme is allowed to interfere in a battlefield involving kingdoms or even the Empire itself. The balance exists for a reason. She shook her head immediately, as though rejecting the thought itself. Every major power agreed to those laws centuries ago. A Supreme entering open war would destroy entire regions. It is forbidden by the World Organization itself. She was right. Everyone knew it. A Supreme-level existence was not merely powerful. They were walking catastrophes. Battles involving beings at that level did not leave kingdoms behind. Mountains vanished. Rivers changed course. Entire nations could disappear beneath the aftermath of their power. That was why the law existed in the first place. Not morality. Fear. Razeal laughed softly. The sound alone made several of them uneasy. Sure, he said. If you really think words written on paper can stop people like that. Lady Vera's pupils trembled. No one answered. Because deep down, all of them understood the truth in those words. Rules only mattered when those with power chose to obey them. People strong enough to shatter kingdoms rarely feared consequences. Razeal looked toward the distant darkness beyond the battlefield once more. Will you gamble? He asked quietly. That was enough. Lady Vera suddenly turned without another word, and began moving down the wall at a near run, issuing orders before she had even fully descended the stairs. Move the civilians from the outer districts immediately. Send messengers to every border settlement. Prepare evacuation routes southward. Her voice echoed sharply through the fortress as soldiers hurried to obey. Whether Razeal was right or wrong no longer mattered. If there was even a chance a Supreme might appear here, then every second counted now. Because if he was telling the truth, then Silver Shield City was already standing beneath a falling blade. Inside the Imperial Palace, silence ruled the throne hall like a living thing. The great chamber stood illuminated beneath pale golden flames burning within towering crystal braziers. Massive marble pillars stretched toward the distant ceiling high above, each carved with the ancient victories of the Empire. Yet despite the grandeur surrounding it, the atmosphere inside the hall felt cold enough to freeze breath. Nerissa sat upon the Imperial throne in complete silence. One leg rested over the other, her posture composed and regal as always, but a sharpness appeared in her eyes tonight that rarely showed before others. The calm warmth she normally carried had vanished entirely. What remained instead was something colder, heavier, and dangerous. Even Celestia, who stood several steps below the throne in formal silence, found herself growing uneasy beneath that mood. Her mother was angry, truly angry, and that alone was enough to unsettle the entire palace. Celestia glanced subtly toward her from the corner of her eye, trying to understand what had provoked such a reaction. Very few people in the Empire possessed the ability to sour her mother's temper to this extent. For one uncomfortable moment, Celestia even wondered if it had something to do with her own recent failures. Her jaw tightened slightly, but before her thoughts could continue, the great doors of the throne hall opened. The heavy sound echoed through the chamber. A massive man stepped inside. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, broad enough to make even the palace guards seem smaller around him. Golden hair fell heavily past his shoulders, while scars marked the visible portions of his exposed skin. Every step he took across the marble floor carried weight behind it. Not merely physical weight. Pressure. A supreme aura rolled faintly from his body, despite his restraint, heavy enough to make the air itself feel denser around him. Celestia narrowed her eyes slightly in recognition. The head of House Rock. So that was it. Her gaze flickered briefly toward her mother again. He was the reason for this atmosphere. Strangely enough, the realization made Celestia feel slightly relieved. At least Nerissa's mood had nothing to do with her. The massive man continued forward without hesitation until he reached the center of the throne hall. Then, in one smooth movement, he swept the enormous greatsword from his back and planted its tip against the marble floor beside him with a muted clang. The sound echoed softly through the chamber. Keeping one hand upon the weapon hilt, He lowered himself onto one knee before the throne and bowed his head. "I, head of House Rock, stand before the throne in answer to the Imperial summons," he said. His voice was deep and steady, carrying respect without submission. Nerissa looked down at him coldly from above. There was silence for a long full moment. Everyone remained silent. That is when the Empress finally chose to speak. "Surely," she said, "you understand why you were summoned here." The man slowly raised his head. His yellow eyes met hers directly. "I will see this war through, Your Imperial Majesty." The meaning behind those words was unmistakable. Permission or not, he had no intention of stopping. Silence settled over the throne room once more. The temperature itself seemed to drop. Nerissa's expression did not visibly change, yet the pressure surrounding the throne quietly intensified. Her fingers tapped once against the armrest beside her before becoming still again. "You speak," she said slowly, as though the will of this empress is optional. The pillar head remained kneeling. He neither lowered his gaze nor answered immediately. That alone would have terrified most men standing before the Imperial throne. But supreme beings were not most men. Nerissa's eyes sharpened further. "You presume far too much for a man kneeling before the Empire," she said. "Do you not think so, pillar head?" To be continued. Hope you liked today's video. Join the community by subscribing and dropping a like. I'll be back with another update as soon as possible. See you then.